Russia will pull out of the START treaty and stop nuclear disarmament if the U.S. continues to deploy its missile defense shield in Europe. President Medvedev said Moscow could also deploy an anti-missile system on its own borders as a response. Let's get all the details right now from RT's Anisa Nawe, standing by for us live. Anisa, thanks for coming on the program. Please explain, what did the president have to say today?
Well, some very harsh and direct words from President Medvedev on the U.S. Growth and movement of their anti-missile defense system. It's been a long-standing sticking point, as we all very well know, between Russia and the U.S. for years, really decades, I think it's fair to say. The new START treaty was signed in April 2010. It was seen as a reset. Obviously, things aren't going the way at least Russia would like it to see. This is what the president said would happen if the U.S. continues to move forward with AMD along its border.
Одним из таких шагов станет развертывание ракетного комплекса «Искандер» в Калининградском самолете. Будут подготовлены, а по мере необходимости реализованы и другие мероприятия по противодействию составляющей. Далее.
Next, in case of an unfavorable development of the situation, Russia reserves the right to refrain from further steps in disarmament and arms control. In addition, considering the interrelation between strategic offensive weapons and defensive weapons, we may have grounds to withdraw from the new START treaty. This possibility is envisaged in the treaty. Nevertheless, I would like to stress once again that we are not closing the door for continuing the dialogue with the United States and NATO on missile defense and for our practical cooperation in this area. We are prepared for that. However, for this work to be effective, we need clear legal framework for our cooperation, a framework that would take into account our legitimate interests. We are open for dialogue, and we expect reasonable and constructive approach on the part of our Western partners.
All right, Anisa, we've still got you live here in central Moscow. Certainly, as you were saying earlier, some powerful statements there coming from the Russian president. The whole idea, according to Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., is to set up this Eastern European missile defense shield to protect it against rogue states, as they call them, such as North Korea and Iran. But as most people know, America has missiles in Iraq, in Afghanistan, South Korea, Japan. And of course, regarding Iran, we've got America's closest ally, Israel, which has thousands of missiles. What is the point of putting missile defense stations in Russia's backyard?
Right. When you think about it, when you actually look at a map, you can see that NATO and its European allies, and then from the east as well, and then down in Afghanistan and the Middle East, are completely surrounding Russia. So you can understand where this concern is coming from. And it has to be said, there's been a lot of dialogue on this. And yes, both sides have said that there has been progress. But once again, we're hitting the same wall. Russia, and President Medvedev said it very well again today. We asked them for some kind of legally binding guarantee that these rockets are not positioned against us, that they are against rogue states, and they just can't get it. They're told, we don't need that. You know, they're against Iran, they're against other possible threats. It's sort of a joint cooperation thing, but we want our missile defense systems to be separate. And Russia pretty much, I think it's fair to say very frankly, has had enough. They're hitting the same wall. They're not given the legally binding guarantees that they need, which, by the way, are not in that START treaty, which was signed in April 2010. It's a very relatively vague document, not to say that it's not very important to both sides, but it doesn't bind and guarantee the interests of both sides. And that's the problem.
All right, RT's Anisa Nawe there, reporting live from central Moscow. Many thanks indeed.